We'll be now looking at the Alekhine defense, which begins after the moves e4 and knight f6. Here, black immediately attacks the white pawn on e4 with his knight without developing any other pieces. And the idea is that if white plays something like knight to c3, then he can quickly move something like d5, or even just play e5 with a pretty equal position. But the idea is that if black doesn't play any pawns in the center, then there's nothing stopping white from playing the move e5, where he gains some space and gains some tempo against that knight. The knight has to move. The knight can go to e5 or e4 or d5. Knight to e4 isn't really logical because then after d4, the knight is trapped. It can't really go back to any of these squares, and that might become a problem in the future. Therefore, black usually plays knight to d5, and now white plays d4 as well because he wants to support the e5 pawn, make sure it's not lost. Black will immediately try to attack the white center with d6, attacking the e5 pawn. And now, once again, white can win another tempo on this knight by playing the move c4, getting more central control of the d5 square, and forcing this knight to move again. The only logical square for the knight where it can not be really kicked away is the move knight to b6, where it puts pressure on the c4 pawn, and it, like I said, it can't be attacked. And now white needs to solve the problem of the pawn on e5. The pawn on e5 is being attacked by the d5 pawn, d6 pawn, and if the pawn doesn't really take the pawn over here, then if black takes white, then white has to take here, and his e5 pawn looks very awkward. It's too far advanced, and it's not really protected by anything else. So the best idea for white here is just to simply take the pawn and make sure there's no problem anymore. Now black here has two choices. Black can either take with the c pawn or take with the e pawn. If black takes with the e pawn, then the bishop here is still blocked, but it can come to e7 later on. White will just simply develop with knight to c3. Black can develop his bishop to e7 to try to castle soon. And now white can play bishop to d3. We'll bring our knight to g2, not f3, because on f3, the bishop g4 pin can be a little bit annoying. After knight to g2, then knight ge2, then the bishop can't really go to g4, or white will play the move f3. We can see that later. For example, knight to c6, we go knight to e2, and now if his bishop comes to g4, then we can just play the move f3. If the bishop goes to h5 now, then we can castle. And if bishop to g6, trying to trade off this light square bishop, which is defending the c4 pawn, we support the c4 pawn with b3, and if he castles, we finish our development with bishop to e3. Alternatively, if black does just plays a castling and doesn't play bishop to g4, our idea is pretty similar. We just castle, and instead of playing f3, we just continue development with bishop e3 here. If he plays knight to b4, trying to remove our bishop on d3, then we need to support the c4 pawn, and we play the move b3. After the trade here, it's true that black has the pair of bishops, but white once again has a lot of central control, and he just simply has more space. These two pawns control the center much better than this one pawn. The other option for black here is after e takes d6 to take with the c pawn. This one is considered the more aggressive variation because this rook or this queen later on can use this half-open c file and attack the c4 pawn for white. But white should continue development normally with knight to c3. This time, black will be forced to develop this dark square bishop on the g7 square, so he'll fiend shadow the bishop with g6. Now we'll play bishop e3, typical plan to defend the d4 square, and maybe later have ideas of bishop h6. Black finishes his plan, and white plays the move rook to c1, which is just against that move, the idea of this open file here. After black castles, then white needs to support the c4 pawn once more by playing b3. Another use of rook to c1 was to stop the bishop from ever targeting that rook on the long diagonal, so rook to c1, this diagonal is pretty safe for white now. And now black has a couple options. If he plays knight to c6, we can gain some space and gain a tempo, but the problem is that the bishop's diagonal is open. So we'll see how this plays out. If he goes knight to e5, just simply bishop to e2. And if f5, trying to play f4, we just go f4 ourselves to make sure he doesn't play f4. If, for example, knight to g4, then we have to trade the knight off, and then just play knight to e2. If e5, we play the en passant, and if bishop takes, this pawn on d6 is pretty weak, and we can trade the dark square bishop off later with bishop to d4. This position should be fine for white to play. This pawn here will be weak as well. Here also, black could play the move bishop to f5, just normal development here, and simply white develops normally as well. If you try something like d5, trying to lure white into giving an IQP after this kind of position, white does not need to take the pawn on d5, and simply he can play the move c5, attacking this knight once more. The knight is forced to retreat to c8 because he wants to keep the d7 square available for this knight, or for the queen at least. And now white can attack the d5 square by playing bishop to f3 immediately. If black plays the move knight to c6, followed by bishop takes d5 and e5, we can simply just take on c6, b takes c6, and knight f3. After e4, we can just play knight to e5, and for now at least, white is up a pawn. I don't see much compensation for black yet. The main move here for black, though, is just to play the move e5. e5 is attacking the center directly and trying to open that diagonal as well. After e5, we take on e5. That's our only option. And after d takes e5, we have to trade the queens. After trading the queens, though, we have a good idea because we can play the move c5, gaining yet more space on the queen side. The knight is going to be forced to go to the awkward square on d7. If it goes to d5, we have a nice tactic here. We can pin the knight here. So he has to go to d7, and then we can just simply play the move bishop to c4. Our bishop gets a c4 square. This is a nice diagonal. This pawn could be weak in the future. And white's space and development are really good. The queenside majority, he can use that in the endgame as well. And really, black's just having an awkward time here because these three pieces are still on the back rank. This bishop, in fact, still requires this knight to move, which will take a while. So while black sorts his pieces out, white can get an initiative and get the good position. Going back for a review, after c4, knight to b6, we have the Alekhine main position here. And after white takes on d6, we play the exchange variation here. And black has two main choices. He can either take on d6, and or he can take on d6 over here. If c takes d6, then we need to remember that he's trying to use a c file, so we strengthen the c file, and then we play the move d5 later on, or we take on e5, depending on the position. Either way, I think white will get a nice space advantage, and black will have pieces who are placed awkwardly, which allows white to get initiative. On the other hand, if black takes on d6, then white will enjoy good development with knight to c3. Just remember to put this g1 knight on e2, and you can put that bishop on d3 before that. The bishop on g4 pin is no longer fearful, and white should just simply castle, play b3 later, and support the c4 pawn. Once again, this position should be good as well. White has a nice central control with these two pawns, and black will many times feel cramped having only this one pawn on d6.